The night tore itself open with a child's scream that cut through the rain and traffic like a blade. Under the flickering streetlight, soaked pavement reflecting red and blue neon, a little girl clutched her father's jacket with shaking hands and begged him to help her, her voice breaking with fear and urgency. Two men stood nearby, shadows hardened into menace, and in that moment the world narrowed to a single choice. The single dad did not think about consequences, broken ribs, or tomorrow's rent. He only saw terror in his child's eyes and a stranger in danger, and his body moved before fear could catch up. Before the rain could wash the scene away, everything changed, though no one yet knew how deeply. If you believe stories of kindness still matter in a world that often feels cold, take a moment now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Every small action helps keep stories like this alive. Ethan Walker had learned to live quietly. At 38, he carried the tired grace of someone who had lost too much too early. His wife had died 3 winters ago after a sudden illness that left no room for goodbyes, and since then his life had become a careful balancing act between shifts at a warehouse, raising his 8-year-old daughter Lily, and holding together a heart that threatened to split open at the smallest reminder. They lived in a modest apartment above a closed bakery, where the air always smelled faintly of old flour and memories. Ethan packed lunches at dawn, braided Lily's hair with clumsy patience, and walked her to school whenever his shift allowed. He did not complain, he simply endured, because that was what fathers did when the world took something irreplaceable from them. That night, they were coming home later than usual. Lily's school had hosted a small science fair, and Ethan had stayed to admire her cardboard volcano with a seriousness that made her glow. The bus dropped. A few blocks from home, and rain began to fall in earnest, cold and insistent. The shortcut through the service road was dimly lit, but it saved time, and Ethan had taken it dozens of times before. As they turned the corner, he noticed a woman ahead of them, her coat thin, her steps hurried, her posture tight with fear. 2 men followed too closely, their laughter sharp and wrong. Ethan slowed, instinct screaming, but Lily tugged his hand and whispered that something was wrong. When one of the men grabbed the woman's arm, the night seemed to hold its breath. Ethan felt the old fear surge, the one that warned him he had too much to lose. But then Lily's small fingers tightened painfully around his wrist, and her plea rose above the rain, asking him to help her, begging him not to let the woman be hurt. In that instant, Ethan understood that courage was not the absence of fear, it was choosing what mattered more. He stepped forward, placing himself between the men and the woman, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. The men sneered, insulted him, tried to intimidate him with size and numbers. The first punch came without warning, knocking the breath from his lungs, and then the world fractured into motion and pain. Ethan fought like someone who had already lost everything that could be taken. He stumbled, slipped on wet asphalt, tasted blood, but he did not fall. He kept his feet because Lily was behind him, because a stranger needed him, because something deep inside refused to surrender. The second man swung wildly, and Ethan blocked with his forearm, feeling bone jolt against bone. He pushed back with desperate strength, fueled by adrenaline and love. The woman broke free and ran, disappearing into the rain. A car horn blared somewhere and lights approached. The men cursed and retreated, melting into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared. When it was over, Ethan dropped to one knee, breath ragged, rain plastering his hair to his face. Lily knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck, her sobs hot against his skin. He told her it was okay, that they were safe, though his hands shook uncontrollably. Someone had called the police, and an officer arrived, taking a brief statement, offering a sympathetic look but little more. The officer mentioned that the woman had been found safe a few streets away and had declined to press charges. The city moved on, as it always did. The next morning, Ethan woke stiff and bruised, his ribs screaming when he breathed too deeply. He made breakfast slowly, hiding his wince when Lily watched him with worried eyes. Money was tight, and missing work was not an option, so he swallowed painkillers and caught the early bus to the warehouse. The supervisor frowned at his condition but let him clock in. The hours crawled by, each lift and carry a reminder of last night's violence. Ethan wondered, in the quiet spaces between tasks, if he had done the right thing. The fear crept in then, whispering about hospital bills, about Lily growing up without him if things had gone worse. He pushed the thoughts away and focused on surviving the day. That afternoon, a black car rolled into the warehouse parking lot, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the gray sky. It did not belong there. Men in suits stepped out, scanning the building with an intensity that made workers pause mid-task. The supervisor hurried forward, confusion etched across his face. A few minutes later, Ethan's name echoed across the floor, called with an urgency that made his stomach drop. He wiped his hands on his jeans and followed, heart pounding. In a small office that smelled of coffee and paper, he found the woman from the night before, her hair neatly styled now, her eyes still carrying the echo of fear but softened by gratitude. She stood beside an older man with silver hair and a presence that filled the room without effort. The supervisor hovered nervously near the door. Ethan braced himself for trouble, apologies forming on his tongue. What came instead felt unreal. The woman explained that she was the daughter of the company's CEO, a woman who had chosen to walk alone that night to clear her head after a long meeting. She spoke of how she had been cornered, how she had thought no one would help, how a tired man with a child had stepped into danger without hesitation. She said she had seen everything through a security camera mounted on a nearby building, footage she had reviewed again and again in disbelief. The CEO stepped forward then, his voice measured, his eyes searching Ethan's face as if trying to understand the man who had changed his daughter's fate. The CEO spoke of gratitude, of responsibility, of the kind of courage that could not be taught in boardrooms. He said the company needed people like Ethan, not just in warehouses but in leadership, people whose values were forged in hardship and love. He offered immediate medical support, paid leave, and something that made Ethan's knees weaken, a new role, with training and a salary that would lift the constant weight of worry from his shoulders. It was not charity, the CEO insisted. It was recognition. Ethan struggled to process the words. He thought of Lily's school shoes with holes in the soles, of the nights he lay awake calculating bills, of the quiet fear that followed him everywhere. He thought, too, of the woman's terror and Lily's plea, and he realized that kindness had ripples, far beyond the moment it was given. He accepted with a nod that felt too small for the magnitude of the change unfolding. News traveled fast. Co-workers clapped him on the back, some with awe, others with envy softened by respect. Ethan returned home early that day, carrying groceries he could afford without anxiety for the first time in years. Lily noticed immediately, her eyes lighting up as he told her they would be okay, that things were changing. He did not frame it as a reward for fighting. He framed it as proof that helping others mattered, even when it was hard. The weeks that followed were a blur of appointments, training sessions, and healing. Ethan's bruises faded, but the memory of that night remained sharp, a reminder of how close everything had come to breaking. The CEO kept his word, mentoring Ethan personally, pushing him to speak up, to trust his instincts. Ethan discovered that leadership, like fatherhood, was about protecting others, listening, and making hard choices with compassion. Lily thrived too, her laughter filling their apartment, her drawings now taped to a refrigerator that was never empty. One evening, as autumn settled in, Ethan and Lily walked the same street where everything had changed. The lights were brighter now, the city having installed new lamps after community pressure sparked by the incident. Lily squeezed his hand, looking up at him with pride that made his chest ache. Ethan understood then that the true gift of that night was not the job or the security, but the lesson etched into his daughter's heart, that her father would always choose to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that matter. As the year turned, the CEO invited Ethan and Lily to a small company gathering. There were no grand speeches, only quiet conversations and sincere smiles. The woman whose life Ethan had helped save hugged Lily tightly, tears shining, and thanked her for lending her father the courage he already had. Ethan watched his daughter absorb the moment, her world expanding with the understanding that kindness could bridge any divide.